Our story begins in Los Angeles, in a future that looks, well, pretty grim. Crime rates have skyrocketed, criminals are everywhere, while the human justice system moves at a snail's pace. Corrupt judges and dragged-out trials have left the citizens completely frustrated. So the government decides to take a crazy revolutionary step. They think, if humans suck at judging, let a machine do the work. And thus, the Mercy Court is born. This isn't your average court. It's a super advanced AI system that acts as judge, jury, and executioner all in one. It analyzes thousands of data points in seconds, and then, bam, a verdict is dropped. And no more case-fixing mafias. So far, Mercy has executed a top-tier criminal named David Webb and 17 of his buddies. The result? Crime in LA has dropped drastically by 68%. Pretty cool, right, guys? But here's the question. Is this system truly perfect? Let's meet our main character, Chris Raven. He's a senior LAPD detective. But today, Chris wakes up in a situation that totally shocks him. He's sitting in a high-tech chair, hands and feet bound, with a headache like his brain's been through a blender. He's completely disoriented and can't remember how he got there. Suddenly, a cold robotic voice greets him. It's Maddox, the avatar of the AI Mercy Court. Being an AI, this judge doesn't waste time with polite smiles or meaningful glances. He gets straight to the point, verifying Chris's identity and stating in charge. Chris is charged with the first-degree murder of his wife, Nicole Raven. Like a bolt of lightning, this info leaves Chris stunned. He tries to explain that he's a cop, but Maddox doesn't care. The AI judge immediately plays video evidence from the crime scene. On the screen, we see a dying Nicole covered in blood, and when an officer asks who did this, she whispers Chris's name. Chris is in total shock. His mouth hangs open, but no words come out. Maddox states that according to his calculations, the probability of Chris's guilt is 97.5.
Crazy, right, guys? A life decided by a percentage number. But because Chris is a former cop and his case is viral, Maddox offers a chance to cooperate, giving Chris an opportunity to prove his innocence. Chris is granted access to a sophisticated system that can peek into CCTV cameras and the phones of every citizen in the city. Prove you're not guilty, Chris. If the percentage drops to 92%, I'll delay the execution. But if it goes up, sayonara. That's basically what Maddox means. Maddox then plays the key evidence. He shows CCTV footage from the morning of the incident. Chris is recorded not going to the office, but instead going to Nicole's house. They were separated because Chris had relapsed into alcoholism and had anger issues. Chris bangs on the door, but Nicole refuses to open it. An emotional Chris smashes the doorbell camera and forces his way in. He stays inside for 26 minutes. Not long after Chris leaves, their daughter, Britt, comes home from school and screams hysterically upon finding her mother dead. Maddox adds that the stab wounds on Nicole's body are very deep, inflicted by a right-handed person, and coincidentally, Chris is also right-handed. Not stopping there, Maddox shows that after the incident, Chris went to a bar, got drunk, and when police tried to arrest him, he went berserk, punching officers, trying to steal a patrol car, basically causing chaos. The problem is, Chris genuinely doesn't remember the incident at the bar. Total blackout. He can only stare blankly at the footage of himself fighting cops and getting bonked on the head with a baton. Chris asks for permission to speak to his daughter, Britt. Maddox denies access because Britt is a minor, and that requires complicated permissions. But Chris gets angry and demands his rights. Finally, Maddox allows him, but only to send a voice message. If his daughter agrees, only then can Chris speak to her. Judge Maddox also sends a written request to Britt regarding this. Chris then asks to speak with Robert, his addiction rehab counselor. Chris thinks that he didn't kill Nicole, but Robert says he can't help Chris, adding that he believes in karma and leaving things to fate. Okay, this guy is useless. Let's move on. Time is running out. Chris has to rack his brain. He starts digging into his past. Chris and Nicole had been married for 20 years, but their relationship cracked due to a tragedy where Chris's partner, Ray, was shot and killed. Since then, Chris became an alcoholic and temperamental.
Maddox shows more evidence. 57 text messages from Nicole to her friends saying she was afraid of Chris and wanted a divorce. There's even a video of Britt calling a man saying her mom wanted to divorce her dad because he was very dangerous when angry. Chris is confused. When did my daughter say that? Turns out, Britt has a secret social media account, aka a second account. Yep, that's girls these days, having multiple identities. Better check your crush, guys. See if she's got a second account. Chris finally asks for help from Jacqueline Diallo, commonly known as Jack, his cop friend who is currently at the crime scene. Through Jack's body cam, Chris re-examines the crime scene virtually. Blood on the walls, Chris's fingerprints on the knife, everything points to him. But Chris finds something odd. In the call history, Nicole had sent a message to someone, but Nicole's real phone has no record of it. Chris realizes his wife had a second phone. Maddox immediately tracks the signal. This AI is sophisticated indeed. True enough, there's another phone in Nicole's car. Upon checking, that phone was in frequent contact with a mysterious number. The tracking begins. The signal is in the Hollywood red zone, specifically at a hotel.
Jack rushes to the hotel. Someone is seen walking out holding a phone. That's their target. His name is Patrick Burke, a chef. When he sees the police, Patrick gets scared and runs like a chicken thief. An intense chase ensues. Patrick runs to the roof, and after a struggle, Jack finally arrests him. Chris interrogates Patrick, accusing him of being Nicole's affair partner. Turns out Patrick ran just because he was scared. He admits he met Nicole at the market. He had a crush on her, often complimented her, and they would meet for coffee where Nicole would vent about her job and her alcoholic, angry husband. But Maddox checks Patrick's alibi. At the time of Nicole's death, Patrick was busy working at the hotel. Turns out Patrick isn't the killer. Chris feels weak and loses hope, and making things more stressful, Chris's guilt percentage actually rises to 98.0%. Maddox says that instead of providing evidence of innocence, Chris just created a new motive for murder. Chris finally gives up. He starts being honest about his broken marriage, about his alcoholism relapse after so much therapy. Chris explains he's still traumatized by the death of Ray, his partner. Back then, Ray was killed by a criminal named Alex, and the court set Alex free. That broke Chris and drove him to alcohol.
On the morning of the incident, Chris went home to get his bottle of booze, but he saw Nicole had thrown it in the trash. He got emotional. He entered the house, smashed Nicole's favorite pot, cut his hand, and got blood on Nicole's shirt. However, after smashing the pot, Chris went completely blank. Memory loss. Chris starts crying, thinking maybe he really did kill Nicole and forgot because of his drinking habit. Maddox sees Chris has resigned himself to fate. Instead of executing him, the AI motivates Chris not to give up yet, as there is still a little time left, asking if Chris doesn't want to see the real truth. Chris's spirit rises again. He starts checking small things he missed earlier. He remembers Patrick saying Nicole was stressed about work. Nicole worked at a chemical company, and she was investigating a case of embezzlement of chemicals at her office. Chris checks Nicole's emails. It turns out 50 kg of urea, a dangerous chemical, is missing from the warehouse. This urea granule, if processed, can become raw material for meth or a bomb. Chris also checks the video content uploaded by Britt. In it, Britt is heard saying she heard her dad entering the house. But when the video was uploaded, Chris remembers he was at the office, and the office attendance machine proves it. So who entered the house? Britt is seen finding no one at home. She thought it was a ghost, and her camera points to the basement. Chris feels it's strange because the basement door is usually locked. And true enough, AI detection spots a human figure hiding in their basement. Chris finds the name Charles Holt, Nicole's coworker, who has a gambling problem. Charles is the warehouse manager at Nicole's company. He's the one arranging shipments. Checking his accounts, this guy's balance is negative due to debt. But there's one important piece of info. It shows Charles often receives money transfers from Robert, Chris's counseling friend whom he called at the beginning. Now it's starting to prove that this murder isn't what it seems on the surface. Chris's guilt percentage even drops to 94%. Chris calls Robert, but Charles answers instead. Charles says Robert is out. This makes Chris suspicious, and when Chris confronts him about working with Robert to embezzle company goods, Charles finally admits that he and Nicole knew Robert was the one stealing the chemicals. But Charles didn't dare report Robert because Robert was very kind to him, often helping him when he needed money.
Chris then tracks the chemical company's delivery truck, and it turns out the truck is parked at Robert's house. On the other hand, they check for people who might have been hiding in Nicole's basement. And finally, on CCTV, Robert is seen climbing out of the trunk of Nicole's neighbor's car. Turns out Robert used the neighbor's car to avoid tracking by the sophisticated AI. Chris tells Maddox that from this, it's obvious Robert is Nicole's killer. However, Maddox says his system still judges Chris as guilty. Chris tells Maddox to trust his gut feeling, but Maddox's AI system isn't designed like that. However, it seems Maddox's AI system suddenly glitches. It's possible this AI is starting to learn emotions, although it gets overridden by the original system again. The SWAT team raids Robert's house. The house is empty, but they find a childhood photo of Robert in an orphanage. In the photo, Robert is with his brother. Maddox's system checks who this brother is. Turns out, the person is David Webb, the homeless man executed by the Mercy system for killing a woman. Turns out, this theft wasn't for money, but for revenge. Robert wants to blow up the Mercy Court building using a urea bomb because his brother was executed by this AI system, and Nicole was killed because she found out about the chemical theft.
And the most heart-stopping part, when Chris checks his house CCTV again. Turns out Britt was kidnapped by Robert. Robert is carrying Britt inside a truck filled with 1.5 tons of bombs. Crazy, that much explosive could flatten a whole city block in Los Angeles. Maddox then concludes that Chris is innocent and sets him free, but Chris refuses to just be released. He needs full access to Maddox's AI capabilities to save Britt. Maddox says his protocol doesn't allow this, but it seems Maddox's AI system changes. He experiences a glitch and gives full capability access, helping Chris save Britt. Robert drives the bomb truck like a maniac on the road to the Mercy building. Police cars blocking the way are rammed like toys. Maddox coordinates with Police Captain Havelock. They decide to herd the truck to a bridge so if it explodes, casualties will be minimal. Upon reaching the bridge, a helicopter team tries to rescue Britt from the truck's roof but fails because Robert is driving recklessly. Chris tries to negotiate through Jack, but the police captain has given the order, destroy the truck. A robotic explosive is sent to blow up the truck even though Britt is still inside. But unexpectedly, Maddox intentionally breaks the robot. This AI is now pro-Chris. What is happening? AI Maddox is starting to act with feelings. The truck keeps moving. Robert can finally be contacted via radio. Robert screams full of vengeance. Chris is the man who arrested his brother, and the Mercy AI system killed him. Even though Robert had proof his brother was innocent, he was an eyewitness that his brother didn't commit the murder. Robert feels the Mercy system is trash and wants to destroy it. Robert finally arrives in front of the Mercy building. Chris then asks Maddox to release him. He goes down to face Robert. Chris stands in front of Robert, who is holding Britt hostage while holding the bomb button, threatening to detonate it. But in a critical moment, Maddox appears on the building's giant TV screen and says he grants a retrial for David Webb, giving Robert a chance to prove his brother's innocence. This shocks Robert, but for Robert, this is more important than anything. Robert starts telling details of the night his brother was arrested. He says David had just fainted next to the victim's body, and at the time the victim was killed, Robert was talking on the phone with his brother. If Maddox's AI system is truly sophisticated, it must be able to track David Webb's location at that time. Maddox secretly gives a coat to Chris to attack. While Robert is distracted listening to the AI's explanation, Britt manages to elbow Robert and escape.
Chris lunges. He kicks the bomb detonator, pointing a gun at Robert. Chris doesn't shoot. He wants to take him alive. But suddenly, Jack, Chris's cop friend, shoots Robert dead from a distance. Why did Jack shoot, even though the situation was under control? A dying Robert whispers softly. He says his brother was holding a phone. Maddox immediately checks the body cam footage of Jack from the old David Webb case, and the corruption is exposed. Maddox manages to reveal the fact that apparently Jack intentionally threw away the phone evidence held by David Webb. It was Jack who manipulated the evidence so David Webb would be sentenced to death. The reason? The police needed a big win so the public would trust and fear this new Mercy Court system. So Jack sacrificed David Webb. Damn, the enemy within was actually Jack. Jack is finally arrested by other officers. Robert dies. The atmosphere returns to calm. Britt runs to hug her father, apologizing for doubting Chris. Chris stares at Maddox's screen. He says a really cool closing line. Whether we are humans or artificial intelligence, mistakes are inevitable. Maddox processes Chris's words. Case closed. Release papers printed. The screen goes black. The end. How about that? Crazy story, right? From being accused of killing his wife to exposing a corrupt police conspiracy and saving the city from a fertilizer bomb. The moral of the story? Be careful if you have friends like Jack, and don't forget to lock your basement door. See you in the next recap. Bye-bye.